This is TWiT.
Imagine your business is coming to a screeching halt because of the word said. Now, in the attempt to crack down on the amount of false news stories posted on their site, Facebook uses fact checkers. Now, who are the fact checkers? Well, they're a set of 5 news outlets which Facebook relies on to fact check articles posted on their site. Now, before I go on, let that sink in for a second. They use other news sites to fact check completely separate news sites. Now, a recent article by Think Progress called out their interpretation of the views of a D.C. judge and a Supreme Court nominee about Roe versus Wade. Now, the article was titled "Brett Kavanaugh said he could kill Roe versus Wade last week and almost no one noticed." Now, that was a title. Now, the article's content uses speeches and comments by the Supreme Court nominee to actually disambiguate the judge's views on the famous court ruling. Now, this must have struck one of the fact checkers' nerves because they marked the site's article with a false rating. Why? Well, because the judge didn't literally say the word that he would overturn anything. Now, what's even more unfortunate here is that the 10 to 15% of the readers of Think Progress are actually from Facebook's referrals. So Think Progress says that when it's disputed the false rating to Facebook, a Facebook employee actually responded by email saying that Facebook defers to each independent fact checker's process and publishers are responsible for reaching out to the fact checkers directly to request a correction. All right, I'm going to stop there because this kind of makes my blood boil a little bit when I think about it. But I do want to throw it over to you guys because I want to get your thoughts on this. Is this way out in left field, or is this a legitimate way to verify news stories? Curtis, what do you think?
Well, in terms of verifying the news stories, I think it's fine. When you look at the groups that they lean on, it's organizations like PolitiFact and such. And while they are run by news organizations, they are separate from the news gathering organizations. PolitiFact is a Pulitzer Prize winning group. It started at the St. Pete Times, which is owned, one has to say, by a foundation, not by a normal private owner. So it is owned by the Poynter Foundation, and the Poynter Foundation does a lot of journalism education. So it's an interesting hybrid. It's not the sort of for-profit media organization we think of. The thing that's important to note is that they got into trouble for a headline, and no one really has called into question the contents of the article. If you look at the article, in the article, it never reports that he literally said that thing. Right. They sort of show how they got there. The people who write the article and the person who writes the headline are almost always separate. I know very, very few organizations consisting of more than one person where the writer, the correspondent, writes the headline. Headline writing is its own art. There are people who are good at it, and these days, those people also tend to be good at things like search engine optimization. You're writing not just to attract human eyeballs, but to attract placement on sites like Google and Bing and the other search engines. So I think what this may well be doing is confusing things because, Facebook has been open about the fact that they are struggling to get this right. They are going to make some mistakes. And I think this probably was one. At the same time, we have to say that this is the sort of thing that people on the more progressive side of the scale have been talking about and doing to those organizations that are more conservative for some time. Now, you can get into all kinds of arguments about which is better, which is worse, which is farther along the spectrum than the other. But what we're seeing in a lot of different cases is a tactic once it's used, will be picked up by those all along the political spectrum. So this is the first volley. I suspect we're going to see a lot more of this in the coming weeks as we head toward the midterms, and it's going to do nothing but get more and more heated as we head toward the national elections in 2020.
Right. I think the interesting part here, I mean, I'm sure that the 5 or 6 news outlets that they chose are actually, fairly good news outlets. They're reputable in that case. But there's always that thing in my back of my head about competition. Obviously, that's the first thing, and the second thing is there's always a room for human error here. Like you were saying, the same people don't always actually write the article titles versus the content, and they're more of sometimes trying to get you kind of grabbed into that article to kind of to actually get to the site so you can just start reading the content. But I think in this case, I mean, it's pretty clear just by reading the article that they weren't saying that the judge actually said these things, that they were just rationalizing these things out of different things that he did and that he said. So Brian, I want to throw this over to you. So what do you think? Is by using these these other news sites to regulate things, do you think that this is the best course of action? Will this help?
Well, is it the best course of action? Probably not, right? It's the first try. So eventually, things will improve. But I think a transparent system like what Facebook is trying here, because they realize the influence they have, at least better late than never, is better than, sort of the honor systems which we had before, right? We hope that someone notices an error, and we hope that people report accurately because that's the job of a journalist. And now we've moved into, sort of this post-truth era, if you will, and social media playing such a big part in creating filter bubbles where people engage in what's known as confirmation bias, right? Seeking out someone who wrote something that validates their opinion, whether it's based on truth or not. And certainly we can look at any set of statistics and twist numbers to bend to support a certain perspective or and get away from what you might want to call objective truth. Right. But I do think some kind of transparent system like this is almost certainly not the right thing, right? But it's at least an effort, and what Facebook is doing is say these are the consequences for bad reporting, which I don't think there's ever been anything other than fear of a libel suit or Scout's honor in the past to keep us all honest. And we have a real proliferation of trying to establish credibility for lots of emerging news outlets in the age of the internet.